Hello good people of C++. Welcome back to another video. Today we are going to discuss variable types, their declaration, and some basics of memory allocation. So without further delay, let's start the video. Before we start discussing variables, let us take a step back and think about the memory allocation of these variables. All computers store variables in memory. So all of these computers have a microprocessor and a RAM to store and process data. And modern computers have additional hard drive disks and solid state disks, also known in short as HDDs and SSDs, which store these data. And the computer fetches this data into the RAM from these HDDs and SSDs and uses them to execute the statements that the programmers write. So similarly, any variable that the programmer declares in the program are allocated specific memory in the RAM. So all of this data that are stored in the RAM are stored in the form of bytes. A byte of memory is composed of 8 different bits. As you can see here, these 8 bits can have 2 different values, and those are either ones or zeros. So because each byte can have 2 different values, we can have 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, and we can multiply 2 8 times, and we can have 2 to the 8, which is 256 different words per byte. From the discussion on memory allocation, we can conclude that variables are allocated memory that hold a particular value. These values can be changed or altered to a different value, although they might or might not have been assigned once. Even if we assign them, we can change them later on. That's why they're called variables. We can use them analogous to variables that we use in mathematics. For example, in algebra, we say that variable x is equals 5, or we can say variable y is equals variable x plus 2. The variables in C++ work in a very similar way, and we will look at that more in depth in our example. So let's move on with the video. Although we have multiple data types in C++, the question is, how do we declare them? In C++, the general syntax of declaring any variables is as follows. At first, we write the variable type, and then we write the variable name, and then we end the statement with a semicolon. Or we can initialize the variable with an initial value. For that, we write the variable type and the variable name, and then we set it equal to an initial value using the assignment operator, which is the equal sign in this case, and we end this statement also with a semicolon. C++ has multiple predefined variable types. And some of these primitive data types in C++ are as follows. We have Boolean data types that tell us whether something is true or false. We have characters that just store character values like A, B, C, D, like letters, or special characters like tabs or new lines. And then we have integers, which store integer values, integer numbers. And we have floating points and double precision, which store decimal values. So let's take a look at these more in depth. At first, let us look at a Boolean data type. A Boolean data type is one of the most simplest data type in C++, and it tells us whether something is true or false. We use the keyword bool to denote that the variable type of the variable that we're declaring is Boolean. And the size of a Boolean variable is 1 byte. That means it is stored in 8 bits as shown below. If all the 8 bits of the Boolean type are 0, that means that the Boolean type is false. It denotes false. And if it is either 1 or anything else other than 0, that means that the Boolean data type is true. So let's look at an example and declare a data type of Boolean. So let us start writing the code for today's program. So I just made a file and named it variables.cpp. Remember that the extension has to be .cpp because or else it's going to save it as a C file. So I just named it variables.cpp. So now I'm going to write some comments at first saying that this program declares variables and outputs them to the screen. And then I'm going to say the programmer is Mr. Code Fairy. And I'm just going to put the date, which is January 13, 2021. And then I'm just going to include the preprocessor directives. For today, because we're going to output to the screen, we're definitely going to be using the IOStream. For now, we won't need anything else. But before we write the main body of our program, I just want to put using namespace standard. This line, what this line does is that it includes the container standard, which is a namespace, to this program. What this does is last time in our code, every time we had to write cout, we were using standard and then the scope resolution operator, which is the colon, and then cout, and then the insertion operator. But because I'm going to be using a lot of couts today, and this is a very complicated syntax, and we have to write standard colon every time, we are just going to include the standard library to our program using this statement. So now every time I want to output something to the screen, I don't have to write standard scope resolution cout, but I just need to write cout inside the main, and that should print out anything that I want to print out to the screen, and we don't have to write the standard and scope resolution in. So now let's write the main body of our program. For that, we write the variable, the function type, which is the return type is int, and the name of the function is main, because every C++ program must have a main. And then because the return type is int, I'm going to return 0 because that's by convention. We return 0 for any C++ program, and then I'm going to save it. And like I said, at first we are going to write a declaration for a Boolean type. So how do we do that? The general syntax of any variable type, like we said, was variable type and then variable name and then a semicolon. So the keyword for a Boolean type is bool, which is in small letters like this, and then we can name the variable name according to the naming conventions of C++. But since we haven't gone over that yet, I'm just going to name it A for the time being, and then we put a semicolon. But we also said that we can initialize a value to a variable. So let's go over that. We still do bool, and then we put the variable name, whatever that is. In this case, we're going to write B because we already declared A. If we have another A, it's going to conflict and it won't know which A we are calling, and so the C++ program won't compile. It's going to give us an error. So we have to name it something different. So I'm going to name it B for convenience, and then I'm going to use the assignment operator, which just assigns a value to something, which is the equal sign, and I'm going to set it equals to a value. Because we said that a Boolean type returns a value of true or false, it tells us if something is true or false. I can set this either as true or as false. For now, I'm just going to keep that false, and we're going to output these two to the screen. But because we did not initialize A with anything, it's going to give us some kind of garbage value, which is not 0 or 1, which is true or false. But because we initialize B to false, this is definitely going to give us a 0. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So we write cout and then the insertion operator like we did in the previous video, but we outputted a string literal last time, but we're not going to do that this time. This time we're going to output a variable to the screen. For that, we still write the cout and the insertion operator, which is the angle brackets, and then we write the name of the variable that we want to output to the screen. And if we want to write something else after that to the screen, we put another insertion operator like so after the variable name. Or if we wanted to do that for strings, we can do that for strings as well. We can say hello world, and then, or hello, and then we can say world, and it's going to print out hello world to the screen. For now, we're just going to say A, and then we are going to put a new line. For that, we use endl, which just outputs the variable to the screen, and then this endl takes us to a new line, which just tells us that it's the end of line, and then it just flushes the stream and takes us to a new line. And then I'm just going to write B in the same way. Like I said, because we did not initialize A, it's going to give us some garbage value that was already in the memory location that was assigned to A. And because we initialize B to false, it's going to give us 0. So we should get some kind of garbage value. For that, I'm just going to say it's a question mark. And this one is going to output 0 to the screen. So let's go ahead and build and run. As you can see, the variable A outputted 66 to the screen, and then the variable B outputted 0 to the screen. Because B was initialized to 0, while A was not initialized to anything. So let's go ahead and initialize A. For that, we're going to do A assignment operator, which is A equals, I'm going to say A is true. We can also say, and let's also change B to something. We can say B is, let's say, 57. But because it's a type of Boolean, whatever we initialize here, this will output 1 to the screen, because anything other than 0, like I said, represents true. And if it's 0, it represents false. But because it's a Boolean type, whenever it's true, it's going to output 1 to the screen. Otherwise, it's going to output 0 to the screen. But now it should output both 1s to the screen since we initialized them. So let's go ahead and output them real quick. Cout A inline, and then cout B inline, and it should output these two first. So at first it should output 66 and then 0, and then 1 and then 1. Let's go ahead and build and run and see what happens. As you can see, at first it outputted 66 for A because we did not initialize anything to A, over here, but we're outputting it. And after that, it's outputting 0 for B because we said B was false, and false represents a 0. And then we initialized A to be true, so it's going to output true to the screen, which is 1. And then we said B is 57 because that's not 0. Anything that's not 0 is true, so that also outputs 1 to the screen. Well, that's it for today's video. Thank you all for watching. Definitely don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And definitely hit that bell button to get notifications when I post my videos. And I'll see you next time. Have a good one.